I think it's the great reminder. So when people say, oh, what is this? What's happening? Why this world is doing this to us? The world is reminding us to look at ourselves and to see who we are and our true essential human nature. And this is one of the essential things that I do every day. And then I collect all the scientific insights and practical application under the transforms.me, which is the gateway to transformation. And what I would like to emphasize is about we have evolved as a human race for many, many, many long years. And there, I think we will have many, many, many long years ahead of us. And the way how we would experience all this time with pleasure, joy, and fulfillment and enlightenment, we have to use what's given to us by the nature over the last 3 million years, which is the intellectual part of our brains. And I think that's the part of our brains which is really giving us the possibility to be more conscious and more aware about everything and about all of our experiences. And if we want to evolve consciously, then that's the main essential pathway to do it happily and joyfully, is when we are aware of who we are, and then we construct all the things around us with that basic understanding in our everyday lives. So therefore, when we are conscious, we know who we are, we know our experiences, and then we can build our relationships with the world in a very meaningful and fitting ways. And what maybe one of the practical things which can accelerate this conscious evolution is, maybe will sound a little bit too provocative, but that's part of how I speak, is stop lying to ourselves and embrace our human nature to its depth, including every single thing that is into our super machine, which is our body, starting from the DNA, starting from our genes, starting from the understanding of the genes, epigenetics, coming up to the neurons, to the neurocircuitry, how that wires and rewires and how it gets hardwired to some degree, and use all of those new technologies to understand us better and then help us to evolve really fulfilling way. And again, that might be well representing an average leadership, an average executive mindset. But then there are examples, and not only in the corporate world or the organizational or the business world, but there are also in the scientist world, where people, where they have studied the material world, have realized when they go deep into understanding what's the tiniest fabric or what's the tiniest material that constructs our reality, the deeper they go, the less material it gets. It really gets to distant elements between each other. And in the end, it comes down to vibration. It comes down to frequencies. It gets down to the unified field. And I think that realization for the people that does science and physics, which was always perceived to be about matter and how it interacts, even the gravity, planets, balls, cannonballs, billiard balls, and so forth. It's the new, let's say, tiny insights into the maybe next revelation of how we leap in our evolution. And possibly the only biggest barrier in that leap is our previous habits, our previous perceptions, our previous models that we have evolved. And they were very necessary for the last industrial revolution and also technological revolution. But once we want to move further from that, we kind of need to leave some of the things behind. And I think one of the things that we need to leave behind is the old paradigms. 400 years ago, there was a paradigm that the earth is flat. And the people who were saying the opposite were under the critique. And the same happened with Earth not being in the center of the solar system. Again, a big leap. And I would dare to hypothesize we are at the advent of the big leap in understanding our interconnectivity with the reality. And we can discuss that in the more details, but the one thing that I can tell right away, why we are so inclined to think about the world and our perceptions or our reality to be the outside rather than the inside is because our senses, all of the major 5 senses, all directed outwards: seeing, touching, hearing, tasting, smelling. But then the real true access to the nature, to human nature, is always inside of us. And this is where the leaders of any domain, of any industry, can start the biggest transformation that possibly can be. Transforming this, finding the root cause of balance, of flow, of coherence, of unified perception that we are one and we are moving towards being in this well-being perspective in the future. So therefore, I think we will experience more and more evidence how we would thrive by acknowledging that we are one at the deepest sense of the reality as the unified field of the consciousness. As we just spoke about the unified field of the infinite energy, infinite possibilities, I think our ability to manage, to master, to orchestrate the energy fields around us is one of the main determinants of our success. Why I'm speaking about that? Because even if you look back to the basic physics about energies, it says the law of energy conservation says you cannot create energy and you cannot destroy it. So the only thing you can do it, you can transform it from one form of the other. One form of the energy could be potential energy, and then you convert it into the kinetic energy and heat and sound, like in cars. And therefore, the same applies to human nature and also human beings and also employees in organization. If 2 employees have the same potential energy, they have their own access to their creativity right from the morning, and they can use it the whole day. The same, they have the access to the outside resources, which is another form of energy. And then at the end of the day, if the result differs for the 2 equally positioned individuals with equal access to the same resources, but the results are different. So the question is, how about their potential for the conversion, potential for the transformation? How well is fine-tuned their transformation algorithms, how they transform these different accessible energies into the result? Therefore, us being better at mastering different kinds of energies, including our own human energies and the fields that we are accessing to, including, let's say, mental energies, physical energies, spiritual energies, and all those kind of things. If we get better at that, we definitely will be more aligned with us and the nature, us and ourselves, us and others in our companies. Therefore, from there, the leadership will be more perceived to be natural as well. Because if the leader maintains or the leader exemplifies that mastery, people would naturally, as through the social mirroring, would perceive that they have it too, and their ability would be activated. Like I sometimes speak about this transformation gene that we all have, and we can activate it, and then we can change whatever we want, actually. So therefore, this knowledge and wisdom about energies being around us and being an infinite source that we can convert and transform all the time, coming the part of the leadership mental model, the executives and decision makers using this skill would be a big change maker in the future. I did it with myself many times, and I think this is why I'm so confident. Although this concept of transformation gene emerged recently, but it has such a coherence with my personal experience of my main transformations. And I had 3 major ones before, and I am still on the journey. I can tell a few of those that I'm doing right now, and it's just reconfirming over and over again. Every single human body has a DNA, which is pretty much the gene sequence. Epigenetics over the last 2 decades really validated that the genes can be expressed or silenced depending on the environments in which people live or what choices people make and what behaviors they exhibit. Therefore, which means the same sequence of DNA can produce different outcomes for twins that have the same exact DNA, just based on the environment and their choices. That means we are in charge in which genes are silenced, which are activated. Historically, we evolved, so our DNA, our genes have seen all of the changes of mankind and evolution, everything. So that's encoded in us. So it cannot be otherwise that people don't know, or that their super machine, the body, doesn't know the change. It's there, it's encoded. And that's why some of the people, when we really adore them, oh, they can do this and they can do that and they can achieve anything they want. It's just that they are using that gene and they have this gene activated. And the other people who constantly say, oh, I cannot do it. Oh, I don't have skills enough. Oh, I don't have enough energy. They are just silencing it. And if you do it repeatedly over time, of course, your transformation gene is silenced, and then you cannot do much with the silenced transformation gene. So first of all, how to activate it? There is a natural way. You can look at the other people with activated gene. And even better, if you have a person that sometime has desire to make a big transformation, and that could be your friend or some of your relatives or just an acquaintance. And then you see that person, for example, decided to write a book 5 years ago, but never really achieved that over the years. And then 1 year, the book is done, and you see the person, you see the book, and you think, oh, wow, it's great. Now my friend got the book. But there is something changed about the person, and you can feel it, you can sense it, but you cannot consciously grasp it because the gene, the activated transformation gene on the other person is speaking to you and tells that, oh, you actually can do it too if you want with any of your transformation. So this social mirroring is the natural way for the activated transformation genes to penetrate through a social fabric very naturally. That's how we can do it. The way how I see it is starting with the same thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's about stop lying to yourself. And this is what I've been practicing because our brains are smart. And the smarter we get, the smarter our liar in us can get, because the liar uses the same brain capacity. And then it's only us as the observer, us as the final decision maker, as a personality to be in charge of what decisions we make. Number one, honesty with ourselves. And if we get out of this transition that we experience right now, and we get into the world where we don't experience that much of restriction, then number one, honestly look back on what this time enabled us to put our attention to. Because once the things slow down, we have more open space for the awareness. And then look for what were the reasons that actually are the barriers in our own lives and in the barriers in the organization. So returning back to the activities, the number one is finding where are these barriers to be removed. Usually barriers are hidden in here. That's why they are invisible. And the only way to recognize there is an attitudinal, perceptual barrier or bias is by observing how people behave. So behavior is exemplifying the attitudinal bias. And refining, finding out those biases, the major ones, and also refining and then removing those is the only winning strategy. Because what people, managers at companies, what do they want? They want improving performance. What the leadership team, what the ownership team of the company wants, increased profit margin, which is the result of the improved performance. So if you would ask any of the managerial people, they would say, oh yes, hyper performance, that would be excellent. What's the biggest barrier in hyper performance? Not the technology, not the digital transformation, not all of these fancy systems. It's the human factors. It's how humans make decisions. So therefore, the most hidden area for barriers to reside is in the brains. And the only way to capture those is through possibly using technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence to look at the behavioral data of your employees, of your customers, of your markets, and then through those behavioral patterns to see that there is a common way of some people clustering around one particular behavioral example. And that would tell that there is most likely one unifying attitude or bias or perception behind it. And so once you figure out that, and then you plug in your intervention or your solution to remove it, once it's removed, people get freer and people get their energies to be contributing to the result of your company and to your success. So therefore, number one, honesty with yourself. Number two, be smart, looking at what the behaviors or collective behaviors exemplifying as potential attitudinal bias somewhere. And then once you figure out that, then is the next mastery, which I haven't explained yet, but then you can plug in technology design of existing systems to help mitigating that barrier, removing that barrier, and helping people to transform themselves to the new identities that wouldn't have this old barrier anymore. We would love to look at the technology as being objective. The trick is, or the trap is, technology is just a great mirror. It's the biggest mirror we have for our human nature. And that's why we sometimes really get into the trouble that we get addicted to technology, that some intention behind from the developers, from the designers, is specifically to get people addicted through the attention economy, through different other kind of things. So therefore, let me remind, technology is just a tool. And then we know if we give a tool to a person, the tool is used by the person with the intention of the person. So therefore, if we use artificial intelligence, if we use machine learning, if we use all of these great technologies, it's just a helpful tool. And it always depends on what instructions do we give to artificial intelligence, what biases as a designers we are passing over to the artificial intelligence. But there's a good news. The better we understand ourselves, our human nature, the better instructions we can give to the artificial intelligence. And then artificial intelligence is a great amplifier. So imagine if we give good instructions, it has a good result. If we give great instructions, it amplifies with the magnitude that what the result the technology can tell us. Therefore, another thing is if people embrace that it's nothing outside of them that determines their inner decision-making or inner choices. I speak about values, I speak about biases, I speak about good and bad sides of the human nature. And they would be honestly saying, well, if we have achieved a bad outcome in society, and if we have achieved a bad outcome through the mental models, societal models, political models, or technological systems, it's just this mirror which says there is something wrong about us and how we have made and built our societies or built our models previously. So therefore, let's leave the technology to be responsibly created and with good intentions and with the good value sets. Good news is, after all, if we have seen the power of technology through of all of these examples, that there could be some addiction and then we need to deal with it. So if there is a power of how we design it, we can always use that power and revert it for the good end. So sometimes people ask for other speakers as well, oh, but what would be your suggestion? How we can shift the cultures, how we can shift the communities and global thinking in a particular topics? And then sometimes they say, oh, I don't know. Of course we know. We have such a powerful tools that have created, for example, in the last century, smoking to be cool, right? If those people remember how the whole idea about getting cigarettes into the society was effectively promoted, efficiently promoted. So the tools work. So we need to just use the same tools and revert it for a better life for everyone in society. Some of the evidence already tells that it's not natural for us to be distant. We always been social beings with ability to express and experience all the social richness of our communication interaction. And one thing that I always emphasize from my point of view, it's possibly better to name it as spatial distancing rather than social distancing, because people are still speaking through the Zoom and speaking through different channels. So the social aspects are still there into the interaction. But what is limited is the spatial kind of proximity. That certainly will bring some implications, and possibly even to the degree of the architecture and design of the physical spaces in cities, like I see, and that is what I predicted in April already in my conversation with Corona Y. They said, oh, how the cities will change due to this. I say, oh, the number one thing, what you will see in the cities, you will see these dispensers for the sanitizers, so for these liquids all around, just like you have the dispensers of water in many cities, in many parks. And this is what we can see, for example, in Paris, there is next to the bus stations. Yeah, here we go, we already have that. It's automated in that sense. But generally speaking, all of the leaps that mankind has experienced, even these revolutionary ones, like industrial, like technological, agricultural, we make our evolution not linear, but with accumulating a certain wisdom in how to live in the specific age, in the specific accessible tool set like we currently have with technology. But then we accumulate everything, including the bad things around that. And then at a certain point, there is this question, where do we go next? And then when we decide on the fork, where do we go next? We always need to leave something behind so that we can actually make the new leap. And as I mentioned earlier, possibly the leap for the conscious, compassionate living and leadership is this possibly the realization and paradigm shift that it's not about separateness. It's not about me and you being different, because it causes a lot of troubles also today in the societies. And it's also not that we are separate from the physical world, from the tangible world, from the so-called maybe not living world. But then this new revelations through the physics of consciousness really tells that on the deepest fabric and the layer of the reality, there is this vibrating unified field of the energies that is always accessible and unifies all of us. So pretty much we all are essentially built out of the same material, same ingredients, same energies, and living in the same field. Once we embrace that philosophy, all of these unnecessary biases that were building up in the last century, they just will dissolve naturally. And I think that's what I look for, that's what I hope for, that would be the next big leap. And that distancing thing will be not felt as we possibly are because of the space we are disconnected. But even this quantum theory is speaking about entanglement, how the two particles at a distance, they are entangled. And that's how we can, I would dream that people would have more perception that hasn't given to us yet, but would be more perception about these deeper layers of the reality, and we have access to that they would feel always connected with everyone without any concerns about the physical distance that possibly is the barrier at that time. Really, number one, that I'm suggesting to myself, and also I'm suggesting to the others, because leaders are those that are setting the scene, setting the stage for the new leadership. And there can be a new stage, a new type of stage for the leadership only if leaders themselves really transform and really have this inner, essential, inevitable transformation towards being in the balance, into the same vibration as with the nature and consciousness. All of these new discoveries, all the scientific discoveries, all the observations that continuously are providing more and more tiny bits of insights about we are one and we are conscious and we can actually have more of that. So tip number one, follow up what's happening with the exploration and the science of consciousness. Tip number one. I think you will get great revelations over the next decade for sure. And you can already have it now if you haven't watched any of those interesting, mind awakening, informative, scientific episodes. So that's number one. Number two, be honest. Once the new paradigms are to arrive, once the new challenges come, once the changes appear to yourself personally, to your organization, honesty is the only fast track, because we are skilled to fool ourselves, and that also partially are in our models in some of the societies. Honesty, infinite honesty, non-stopping, being persistent, being consistent, honest internally, because this is the origin of all of your leadership in the future. And if you have experienced what the honest relationship with yourself means, which means listening to all of your instincts, listening to all of your bodily signals, it's all about, like, it knows this gift that we have, our bodies, has experience that encompasses so much, and it can tell you answers to pretty much everything. So that's number two. So number two, honesty with yourselves, listening and accessing the infinite power. And tool number three, make the world a better place. Put all of this, your own transformation, into practice. So the first two were more towards be ready for a paradigm shift, get your conscious awareness over to it, spend some time to follow up what's changing. Number two, take it all in, which means honesty, transparency, integrity. And number three, be ready to put it into practice right away. Start with yourself, practice with you, do some tiny transformations with yourself. And I promise that I promised I will tell you what I do right now. So what do I practice right now? First of all, it might be funny for many people. I started to flossing my teeth. I think one of the biggest challenges for many. And there are these tiny tricks. Oh, you start with one and do the rest. No, it just happened with me like this. I just got it. I just like, oh, my body said, my teeth said, all of this said, we love it. Just do more of that. I was like, okay, I trust you. If you say this, you like it, I will do it. I'll do it for you, which means for myself. And the second thing, because of living at home, I started to brush my teeth after every single meal. So if I have 4 meals a day, I brush teeth 4 times a day, and I floss teeth 4 times a day. And it just became so easy. It just goes. I just don't need to think about it. And it was a big thing for me before. I wouldn't tell more about details before, but I can tell you what's happening now. And it wasn't there, and it's now here. And there is no question. There is no debate in my head. There is no any reason, any kind of misleading lie coming in. They already know. They have no choices with me. So that's what I do, and that's what I suggest every conscious and compassionate leader to do with their lives right now. One of the simplest tools everyone can use. It's called vectoral transformation. Vector is a straight line with an arrow at the end. It comes from the typology of change with the transaction, transition, transformation. Transaction, one time, it's like a bargain. Transition, period of time, you sign up for stay away from sugar for some time, but then it kind of breaks up because the deadline came, the changes in the world. But then transformation is about removing that endpoint. So there is no circumstance that will actually be able to remove you from going on that line, which means arrow, which is in geometry, it's vector. Very simple thing. Here you get the target. This could be the target, flossing your teeth every time after your meal. And then these are the deviations. And this is geometry. And if you floss the teeth after every meal, you're walking this arrow, which usually in color is green. So this is the transformation vector, the green vector. And these next ones, these are yellow, these, and then the most remote ones are red. Why these other are important? Because you realize if you skip flossing your teeth after one meal, you are not on that arrow anymore. You're somewhere here. And therefore, you are on a different vector, which leads to a different target. And you will never be able to get here anymore. And this is how practically it works. And to give you more context, then on the other arrows, you can put, like here is I'm flossing after every meal. This yellow could be I'm flossing after every second meal. And this is I'm flossing after every fourth meal. And then the other one could be about the day. So for example, I do floss after every meal 5 days a week. And this is I'm flossing like 3 days a week. And therefore, you naturally having this reminder, like a very basic visual that keeps you reminding about which arrow you're walking. And then anytime that you try to fool yourself removing or moving away from your arrow, you know you will be on a different vector, and the different vector leads to a different final result. And that's the way how I found, and people now are really using that. So they put one in the bathroom for brushing the teeth. They put one on the fridge for a certain behavioral changes, and just stick with it. Like eating after, I don't know, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., whichever that is. And if you have the tradition after 7 p.m., you after some time can move it to the 6:45. Tiny change, then you're 6:30. Whichever you want to go. But this is one of the simplest recent tools which has been very warmly welcomed by many people. Just like it's like a small mirror for yourself and to get to where you want to get. And then you know you never get there if you move away from your transformation vector. I really believe that why people sometimes revert back to their old habits, because they haven't found the depth of why. They haven't get to the depth of why this and why for them. Once they have realized the full depth and the richness and understanding why this for me, I think there is no possibility for reverting back. It's only when you haven't understood it fully, the thing, and fully the application for yourself. So therefore, if there is this history that tells, oh, actually it was quite successful, but then something happened, it's not about something happened, it's just a reminder. You possibly need to go a little bit deeper to get the intimate relationship with this behavior and yourself and your nature, how that works. So about the transaction, transition, and transformation, it came into my work during my MIT time. And why? Because people look at changes and then they try to look at the change as a unified thing. And this is when it gets complicated, because changes can be different. And therefore, I realized there has to be typology. So typology of change includes these three. The transaction, we understand that even from we give the money, you give me apples. That's a transaction. I go and buy a gym membership. So I get the membership. That's a transaction. It might not be that you go to the gym anytime in the future, but you get the membership. And then transition is when you really stay with your new behavior for a particular period of time. Stay away from the sugar for January. But then when February comes, you kind of start to really let yourself out of your self-created mental jail, and then you kind of revert back to where you were. So this was the time when I realized transition is the most popular format for behavior change, but also the most evidence comes why it's unsuccessful, why it's unsustainable, because of this mental model which tells you you will suffer for some time and then it will be gone. And that doesn't require a person to go inwards and seek for that personal transformation. But once you remove the deadline and then you see this infinite arrow and vector, then there is no other way how you look internally and find, who do I need to become to accommodate this path on this vector? So therefore, the transformational change is only this way.